Welcome back, Concord Food Co-op. Good to have you back.
Oh, thank you.
Wouldn't be Friday without you.
Yeah.
Now, see, does Lorrie know how does Lorrie know how this works?
She's been briefed on that, but I didn't tell her about the way you can set her off guard sometimes.
She
and make
talks,
her nervous.
and you and I go have breakfast.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you understand that? You're here for half an hour now. Okay, you understand that? Lorrie Brown, program director for the Friends Emergency Housing, the family home shelter of the Friends program. Been with Friends program at Friends Emergency Housing for 8.5 years. Wow.
Good morning.
How are you?
I am well, thank you.
So before we move on to other guests, what's changed in 8.5 years since you've been there?
I think that we, aside from COVID, where everything's changed, I think that we update our program as we see as necessary and as to kind of change with the times. But for the most part, I think that we have a really solid program, and we've been pretty consistent all those years.
So the need is the need.
Absolutely.
That hasn't changed, just...
Nope, and our program is a case plan model. So from the time I started to today, families are participants. They're not just shelter guests. So they have case management, and they work on budgeting, and they work on increasing income and all of the things that they need to stabilize in order to not only get housing, but to maintain long-term. That's our goal.
Because I think people who aren't in that situation, unfortunate situation, people just say, well, just pick yourself up by your bootstraps and move on. They don't have some people don't have a lot of sympathy for it. And people don't want to be in that position.
Well, I always say that homelessness is not a reflection of character. It's a situation. And any one of us are one or two paychecks away from it.
Well, thanks for that. Jeez. All right, Greg. You and I might not be here.
So,
wow.
So, Lorrie, program director for the emergency housing. Now, the Friends program has a number of different programs.
Oh, absolutely.
So this is one. But isn't the emergency shelter? I mean, you have families, and isn't that one of the only ones in the area that actually provides emergency housing for families?
So there is Family Promise, which uses volunteer churches to shelter their families. We are the only family homeless shelter that has its own building in Merrimack County.
Oh, wow.
Yep. And how many families are you able to house at one time?
We can shelter 8 families at a time.
Yeah. And what's the duration that they can stay?
There is no maximum.
Really?
They're there until they don't need to be, because, like I said, our goal is not just to get them housed. Right. Our goal is to make sure they don't need to come back before they leave.
And typically, what is are you running at capacity or 50% capacity? What is the
currently?
Yeah.
So right now we are running less. So the beginning of this, when COVID hit, we were asked to decompress our building because there's family sharing areas. Didn't really have the ability to social distance, so we actually moved half of our families, 4 of them, into a hotel over the course of 3 months. So we were providing, our staff was providing services over the hotel and the shelter. We no longer have the hotel, so we are not at full capacity at this time because we're diligently working on trying to make our building accommodate social distancing and, following CDC guidelines.
Wow. But like you said, COVID threw a wrench in the works for everybody.
Absolutely.
Nonprofits, and we've talked about this before, and with you, Greg, and without you, I've talked about the fact that here we are, August, and nonprofits usually have banquets and golf tournaments and fundraisers throughout the course of the year. That's the money that comes in allows them to accomplish their mission. They haven't been able to do it. And some still haven't gotten a hold of the whole Zoom thing yet, and it's kind of new territory. Not sure how do we forsake a golf tournament and make it, where's the money? Nonprofits are just paying the price for this, and unfortunately there's trickle down. The families that need it most, the individuals, they're not able to be helped, but you're trying.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Our biggest fundraiser was canceled because it was supposed to be this spring during this time.
Yeah.
So we didn't have it.
No, I know a lot of groups that have either banquets or special event kind of things, black tie nights or dinners, and canceled. And it's like, all right, so they're all going, where's the money coming from? There are only so many grants out there that you can apply for. So it's a tough one. So I applaud you again, for bringing light to this issue, Greg, because it's something that's not going to go away.
No, I think most of the nonprofit community is really looking at they're in this for at least a good part of next year, trying to say, well, it's not going away quick, and they're having to adjust. And as you were mentioning, it's even any fundraising events that they're thinking about even for next year. It's just like you have to go into it with the assumption that the current conditions will be the same ones that they're experiencing next year. So designing it around that and trying to figure it out, But it is, I wanted to also to have the guests that are on today just talk about the impact that is having on their clientele. What is their clientele experiencing?
Good point. Pamela, where are you?
I'm here.
There you are. Hi, Pamela.
Hi there.
Pamela Keilig?
Keilig,
public policy specialist for the New Hampshire Coalition Against Domestic and Sexual Violence, responsible for supporting the development and implementation of public policy and legislative initiatives of the coalition. So, okay, legislatively, now that begs another question. We have an election coming up, September 8th, and then the fall, blah, blah, blah. If Greg is right, and this drags on 2021, we can't get the full legislature back in the chambers. That's going to make it a little more difficult, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think we saw a snippet of what that looks like this past legislative session, where there was a long period of time where we weren't sure what was going to happen with a lot of the bills that were left open for discussion. And it was really interesting and definitely unprecedented to see remote hearings and executive sessions taking place, and the whole House moving to the Whitmore Center at UNH just to be able to cast their votes and decide on the legislation.
That's something I've spoken with a couple of legislators about, and they're a little concerned about trying to do everything on Zoom or hey, we're going to go to the Whitmore Center. Okay, everybody sit 6 feet away from logistically, it's still something they're trying to tackle.
Yeah, and I think we've all had to work incredibly to be adaptive in these times and figure out what works. And I think just speaking to what y'all were talking about earlier, and that includes adapting our services and just figuring out how can we reach people in this new way and go about our business in this new way.
So how has COVID changed how the New Hampshire Coalition Against Domestic and Sexual Violence, how has it changed how you accomplish your mission?
Yeah, it definitely rapidly impacted the individuals experiencing domestic and sexual violence. And over the last 5 months, advocates and crisis center staff have really worked tirelessly to innovate their services and identify new resources to provide critical life-saving support. And that includes, we now have 11 crisis centers who are using online chat and text messaging features as a new way to reach folks who aren't, when we aren't able to hold traditional in-person services. So really rethinking how we approach our work and finding any opportunity we can to connect with individuals who need our services.
Does it concern, and I'll say this to Lorrie as well as Pamela, does it concern you that the media is, A, we're talking the election, B, we're talking COVID, homelessness, we're not talking about. We're not talking about domestic violence. We're not talking about the opioid epidemic. So people just think, oh, it's over. It doesn't exist. There's out of sight, out of mind. Does that scare you that now you're going to have to, when you finally get your feet back under you, you're going to have to start from ground zero again?
I think that opportunities like this keep us out there. And we work really hard. So we have people that, we put out requests to, and we put out conversation to, that kind of are always in the know. I don't think that people think that it's going to go away. But yes, I do agree that we are, homelessness is not in the forefront. Domestic violence is not in the forefront right now. No. But we very much still have that problem.
But
both of those
they're
problems.
Still going on.
Absolutely.
And Pamela, same to you. I mean, are you afraid you're losing ground in terms of your information and education that you've been doing for all these years?
I wouldn't say we're afraid we're losing ground, but we definitely recognize that there's so much uncertainty around, and then compacting that with the financial crisis that is happening at the same time. We don't know what 1 month from now, 2 months from now, or 6 months from now is going to look like, and what those long-term impacts and repercussions are. And I think in terms of just raising that awareness, we've again had to adapt even our prevention education to what does that look like in a remote setting? How can we still work with schools when we aren't able to be in person? So it definitely continues to make us really work hard to figure out new ways to reach people throughout the communities, and our crisis centers work really hard throughout the state to really get the messaging out there and let people know that we're still there to support them.
Well, and the nice part in this whole COVID pandemic is the co-op. You kind of come across as like the big brother, because you're still bringing people together, still bringing the nonprofit family together, and even though you're all equals. Now, and let me do the big brother analogy that it's like, hey, come on, I'll take care of you. Come on in, we'll help you, and you're doing that, and I think that networking is going to help.
Definitely so, and I do want to mention that the New Hampshire Coalition Against Domestic and Sexual Violence is the Rounded Up at the Register recipient this month at the Concord
Big Brother.
Food Co-op.
That's what I'm talking about.
So, if you are shopping at the co-op, round up for the New Hampshire Coalition Against Domestic and Sexual Violence this month. It's great to be able to work with all of these local nonprofits that are providing most vital services to our community, and it's a part of the co-op mission. So all the owners of the co-op, $100 one time.
Right.
That's part of being an owner of the co-op is that it is owned by the 8,000 members. And so that's part of, what they part of the vision and part of why they want to be an owner is to give back to the community and to support these local nonprofits that are doing such important work in the community.
So business has been good at the co-op, but is it also translating to more owners?
Oh, yeah, ownership, it's been phenomenal.
Okay. So people are dropping their $100 and they want to be part of the action.
Right.
Good.
Right. And there's a long list of benefits, but I think a lot of it is because they want to be associated with an organization that truly is connected to the community.
Wow. Pat and I should try that. Give $100, you can be part owner of the show. Yeah. And we'll make a contribution.
Right.
Some of it.
Yeah.
After I get gas money.
So I can't believe Connor. I know Connor. Connor is.
No, Connor's good.
Well, yeah. Well, Connor is. She's very outspoken, and so she must just be biting her tongue right now. So I'd like to bring Connor into the conversation.
No, you can't. We have to take a break.
Oh.
Connor,
too bad. I'm
just
sorry.
Sit there. He set you up.
Okay.
He set you up. We have to take a quick break. So all the stuff that's been festering, you hang on and you can explode in 3 minutes. Okay?
Thanks, Chris.
All right. We're going to take a break. We'll be back with more right after this. You're on. Go.
Hello.
How are you?
Oh, no preface? Are you telling me run off? That's
no pressure at all. You're among friends. Go ahead.
You had a great intro. You couldn't have asked for a better
Come
one.
on. Thank you for being a friend. What more do you want?
Oh, my gosh. Well, I guess you're right.
So, you've been sitting there waiting, taking notes. What do you want to say?
Oh, my gosh. Okay, so I guess we'll start with thank you for having us.
You're welcome.
Really appreciate it. And then to kind of speak to what Lorrie was saying earlier with the fact that we're not at capacity, I just do want to make a note, too, that doesn't mean that there is not a capacity for needs, because the needs that are high priority right now are priority needs that weren't before. So, for instance, Lorrie and her team have been, especially during the beginning of the pandemic when grocery stores were wiped of everything, they were buying meat in bulk. We're buying toiletries and cleaning supplies. So while we're not running at capacity with families, that's purely for safety reasons, but that doesn't mean Lori's amazing team isn't working at full capacity all the time, if not more. So I just want to give them a shout out because they're fantastic, and they've just rolled completely with every change in the pandemic and have never batted an eye.
Thank you, Connor.
And I think that's an important part, and I think that's something a lot of nonprofits are seeing, but it's especially important to keep families safe in this time. And Lorrie, I don't know if you touched on at all about future planning for when stimulus packages and rent forgiveness ends. If you have any thoughts on that.
So that's
no, we were waiting for you to touch on that.
That's kind of what we're working on when I said, we're working on plans to be at full capacity. We have a strong feeling right now people are not necessarily feeling the effects financially. They're not necessarily losing housing right now. We have actually reached out to our families that we have serviced as far back as 3 years, to as many as we can, to find out what their situation is as a result of COVID. Most of them are either still working or they're receiving the extra unemployment.
Okay.
So they're okay. So we feel that when that ends, that's when things are...
Well, when that ends, then you've got, as Connor was saying, the mortgage forbearance.
And the
you've
eviction.
got the rent forgiveness. When that goes, you have a potential perfect storm.
Right, and that's what we feel is going to happen. So that's what we're working on right now, is trying to put things into place to be able to handle that when that happens.
Okay, so again, great that you're planning, great you're looking down the road, but if COVID stays around, where's the money come from? How are you going to function because you don't have the fundraisers, you don't have the stuff? How do you continue?
Well, that's where I come in.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Yeah, so as Laura said, our big fundraiser was April 15th, or was supposed to be. So we, I think, had just sent off the first round of reminder postcards and then decided that we were going to not do that. So yeah, it's tight. And I feel like it's emergency housing especially is a beast with funding anyway, just because of the way it works. When we receive funding from HUD, like those requirements change frequently, and they may change without notice. So emergency housing is one that it's an incredibly important part of our program, but it's already difficult to fund. We have had the benefit of some of these organizations that we received grant money from in previous years. They've stepped up with, some additional temporary assistance, or there's organizations who may have put their funding to a more broad subject base. They're narrowing to, they want to support housing, they want to support youth and families. So we have a little bit of help in that realm where people are prioritizing their funding for organizations like ours. But I definitely think you're right. Long-term funding is going to be interesting.
Well, I think that there's only, and there are some very wonderful companies, large companies that are nice benefactors, that, you apply for a grant for whatever. But if all the nonprofits are experiencing the issue, then, hey, they're all going to try to go for the same tree, and there's only so much money around.
Yes, and we are seeing that in some organizations as well, who maybe had their own financial struggles during this pandemic, and so their normal sources of funding are reduced in entries or just in total amount that they're going to disperse.
So I'm going with Greg that hey, we're looking for some sense of normalcy by next year, but how do you prepare for it in the interim? Just day to day, week to week.
I'd say to be fair, and this may just be me being an optimist as usual. So,
that's
or
okay.
if you have a different opinion of this, so. I mean, we're just rolling with the punches like every other person. And I think that makes it easier for us to digest when we're not the only person with this problem. And we're not the only business, and we're not the only shelter. So we have a lot of organizations that we can lean on for support and ask questions. And we're truly all in this together. And I think Concord has always had a unique sense of community around nonprofits to service these populations. Yep. And I think we've been feeling the love
Okay.
And I was going to add that too, Connor. To Peter's point, is everybody's looking for the same source of funds, but
Right.
this community, the nonprofit community, it's my experience, they really work together. So if one organization says, I have access to these funds, but I don't really need them as much as you do, or, I see you need services and we can help and we can provide those services for that piece. So it's great to see how this community actually does work together. They don't feel that they're, if you get it, it's at the cost of our organization. They do really work together. On a different subject, Pamela, I'm hearing from a lot of the nonprofit community that there's everybody's kind of stressed out. They're getting very, very tired. There's not much time left. But how is your organization doing? Or is this really kind of wearing on staff?
Yeah. Thank you so much for asking that. We are constantly, our work is constantly dealing with crisis, and this has been a heightened time where people are really working around the clock, working in new and different ways, and I think that definitely has taken a toll on advocates who are constantly trying to problem solve.
We're going to have you back on because we've run out of time at a very important part.
See, I'm glad you said that, not me. Pamela, Lorrie, Connor, Greg. Wow, sounds like a law firm. Thank you, guys.
You're in the mood for real food. It's Concord Food Co-op.